GM, welcome to another Touchgrass podcast episode. Today we have Vinny, who's Chief Move Degen at Momentum. I've been seeing Momentum all over the timeline. Vinny and the team also very close partners of Wormhole and have been using the Wormhole stack. Vinny, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on the Touch Bus podcast. Excited to chat today with both of you, Rachit and KG.
Let's get it. Vinny, start us off. I think everyone in the audience, our audience loves backstories. Tell us about the founder's story. How did you get into this? What's the backstory for Momentum?
Yeah, well, look, my crypto journey started back in 2016 when I first moved from Sydney to Dubai. I was in the e-com space and encountered a lot of digital nomads in that community. Many people were taking notice of crypto at the time, which led me to travel around the world, attending a lot of really cool crypto events and meetups. And that's where I got really immersed in the space. So Momentum was co-founded back in 2022 by Chef Wen. She was developer number 5 at Libra, right? The original Facebook coin. I originally joined in as an angel investor and joined the team full-time late last year as a CSO. So we started off as the first official multi-sig solution for the entire Move ecosystem, which includes Aptos, Sui, Movement, and IOTA. And from there, we upgraded to become the whole central liquidity engine with our our V3 DEX as the first flagship product, which is what we're most known for today.
Awesome. And what sort of talk us about, I'm pretty sure the team's really happy with all the mindshare you guys have been getting on the timeline. I've been seeing everyone put MMT next to their name as well. How's that going internally?
Yeah, look, honestly, it's been quite surreal seeing MMT trending. The community is growing really strong organically, especially engagement. It really validates that we're building something that people actually want to use and be part of. The fact that we've been able to be consistently number 1 on Kaito, it's not just the marketing. It's, we do have over 2.1 million users and over 65% of them actively add liquidity to the pool, which is a far higher ratio than any other DEX. A big part of this growth is due to our partnership with Buidlpad. Through the TVL campaign we've been running, we've seen the TVL grow from about 180 million to about 570 before the liquidation crisis. But right now, anyone can deposit to earn bricks, which is our version of points. And we're just really excited with all these, real users and real volume. And like I said, a community that really genuinely believes in what we're building.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was kind of surprised. What's this all MMT on everyone's bio? And I was kind of surprised at the first glance as well. Also, let's take a step back to understand your broader vision in general, what you saw before building on Sui. And, in the last couple of years, I think one major trend that everyone kind of envisioned was move chains are going to be like the next, trend, and they're going to be leading because of the security aspect and whatnot. What made you so bullish on building on move-based chains like Sui? And where do you think Sui currently stands among other general purpose chains?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned earlier, the story with Wendy being developer number 5 at Facebook, Libra, /DM. She's been working with the technology stack since its inception. So our deep expertise from the original team is really invaluable, in scaling here with Sui. We were live on day 1 of Aptos and live on day 1 of Sui, and also now with Movement and also IOTA, which has moved to Move chain. It's super interesting there because the Move chains have grown a lot. And they've also had a lot of ups and downs. I mean, Sui's only had ups, but it was a late comer. It was not the first mover coming out of Libra. All of the hype was on Aptos. And for a lot of reasons, they, weren't able to capitalize on that. Also, a lot of, FUD around Mo leaving, which was really interesting because we were initially intending to launch, on Aptos as soon as possible, but with everything happening, with the team reorganizing, that's really changed things up. So we've really doubled down on our commitment with Sui. Sui Foundation came as an investor. Denny, one of the co-founders, invested into us. And the support they've given us is really incredible. Just in terms of where Sui stands, I'd place it on the same category as other high parallel execution chains like Solana, which is obviously the king of that. They're solving, similar scalability challenges, but with different approaches. Sui, a lot of people don't know, is still very early relatively in its life cycle. It's worth remembering that Solana had an entire market cycle head start. So we only, for example, launched BTC-Fi this year. Like WBTC only went live on February 4th, right, on Sui chain. What's really exciting, I guess, is seeing Sui gain traction outside of its own ecosystem. There's been a lot of growing buzz about it becoming the next Solana, which shows that the narrative is really resonating beyond just the Sui community. I guess looking ahead, I'm particularly interested in how retail adoption will scale beyond DeFi over the next few years. Sui has made like GameFi and AI key strategic focuses, which could really open up like new, retail user bases. I think these sectors feel like natural fits for the whole high throughput chain, and it'll be really fascinating to see how this thesis plays out in practice.
Is there a story behind Wendy's sort of thesis on Momentum? Like when she decided to build on Sui, like when Momentum was founded, like what was the gap that the team found that they wanted to build into?
Well, they originally started off as the multi-sig solution, right, for Aptos, which at the time when Aptos was raising, Sui wasn't raising, right? So really taking a step back, we are the official flagship solution of Sui and Aptos, and there's like 3 products there. So the first is kind of like safe on EVM, so it's like treasury management, and then we have token investing, which is like squads on Solana, and then we have our App Store, which is liquidity provisioning, and that's where over 70% of our TVL in the multi-sig is, and that's where people can utilize the UI, and then they can deploy into different DeFi protocols. So across those 3, we have over 700 million in TVL between just the multi-sig side. And like I said earlier, I mean, the reality was Aptos was the initial focus, but then as Sui launched, and it just became very natural because of the close relationship with Sui, that we also deployed the solution on Sui. And Sui literally just outpaced Aptos over that next year and a half, right? And therefore it just became more, Sui centric. And so when we decided that it made more sense to deploy the token on Sui, given that its ecosystem, honestly, its TVL, on-chain DEX TVL, on-chain DEX trading volume, if you go back to say Q1, you're talking about 500 million daily on Sui versus Aptos, which was only about 25 to 50 million at the time.
Got it. I think, TG is coming up and you guys are doing a community offering. I think this has become like a recent kind of trend as well, where a lot of projects are allocating a decent amount of public sales and making it at the same valuation as previous private rounds and stuff. So what was your approach to doing a community offering, and why did you guys select Buidlpad in specific?
That one's a really tough one because like timing is everything. Like the reality is the hottest launchpad changes every 6 months, right? If you go back last cycle, it was obviously Coinlist, right? Now they've just done too many projects without even listing a lot of them, and it really changed things. And so it wasn't actually our first preference back in I think early Q2. But that was a different market, right? We were going, it was past the bull going into this bear, and it was kind of in no man's land. Nobody knew what was happening, and alts were getting killed, right? Q1, Q2 was a terrible time, right? It wasn't until going into Q3, everything just switched around. We want to do community offering because we want to strongly, we want to give back to our community and give them the ability to participate in our growth from the start. Which really aligns our incentives and creates genuine long-term supporters rather than speculators. So we've always prioritized looking after our WAGMI trading competition users, which is the traders on the platform that I mentioned. There's been over 2.1 million unique wallets connected, and over 65% of them have provided liquidity. We always had an intention there to offer some of that as a launchpad that we wanted to do on our platform because we have what's called a token generation lab, TGL. So it's kind of like, think of it as like the coin list of Sui, right? Where all of the top projects are blessed by Sui Foundation, which means they're invested by or they're granted by Sui Foundation, and they have like incentives alignment or co-marketing agreements. And we would sort of expedite them, right, through listings and give them over like 50,000 new users straight away. I mean, to really answer the question why we chose Buidlpad, look, simply, they're the #1 launchpad by performance this year. I mean, if you look at their track record, Solaya, Sahara AI, Lombard, Falcon Finance, every single one of the launches have exceeded 1 billion FDV. Falcon Finance listed at above like 6 billion, which is insane, which really shows that it's not just luck, but they're consistently identifying and launching quality projects. What really sealed it for us was their incredibly high standards. Like one of their previous projects had over 200,000 users that completed KYC, and also all the prerequisites to even qualify, and less than 20% of that even got through the vetting process, which means that the level of curation is really serious, right? Really qualified participants who understand what they're investing in, and not just anyone looking for a quick flip, which is the unfortunate reality of all of the launchpads and community offerings today. But working on Buidlpad overall, it's given us access to this highly engaged and vetted community of investors who have consistently backed winners. And for projects like ours, like that quality of participant base matters just as much as the capital itself. So we launched the TVL campaign with them called the HODL campaign, and we exploded from 180 million TVL to about 570 with about a couple of weeks. So it's been incredible to see that support. Obviously, the liquidation thing was a big thing I mentioned earlier. We actually crashed all the way down to like, I think 420. Now we're back up at like 480. But it's it was an interesting event to experience. But yeah, that's kind of like why we've been working with Buidlpad.
Vinny, do you have any takeaways for other teams that might be evaluating Buidlpad? Like, hey, here's what you should do. Here's how you should think about it. Any advice for those guys?
Everybody's asking about that. You have no idea how many people are pinging me. Can we get an intro to Buidlpad? I'm like, you got to understand, Buidlpad's not like other launch pads. They're not a volume game. They, the company that's behind them, Nomad Capital, and the founder has a huge, track record in the space. He was the former CEO at CoinMarketCap. He was a director at Binance. So they're very particular in the projects that they work with. We are literally the 5th project. I mean, you have to be at least the billion FDV project, or even listing to really qualify. And I think the best is really to look at the track record. And the 2 previous launches just before us was Falcon Finance, and then before that was Lombard, which is the largest, I guess, semi-centralized, if you want to put it that way, because WBTC is very decentralized. BTC LST or BTC 5 player out there, and they're absolutely huge. And it's really humbling to be around a lot of these guys, because Lombard's been around for a very, very long time. But yeah, I think the general advice these days is more people asking about like, what's the best launch pad? And the reality is the answer is going to change every 6 months. I mean, I would expect Buidlpad to still be #1, given how tight they are with their criteria for at least the next couple of years. But I think you need to hit a lot of the right metrics, especially on the community side. That's one of the hardest things. Especially like, it's not just Launchpad, but even look at centralized exchanges and how they're trying to grade projects. More than 90% of projects fit in the bucket of, oh, we don't really have real users. We just have a test net, until we TG and deploy. We're really fortunate that we're a DeFi protocol, because we were able to prove that we have these users and we have all this on-chain traction. Where if you say you're a layer 1, you might have like 10 million testnet users, but most of them are just farming your airdrop. And it's really difficult to figure out how many of those actually, net worthwhile to, say, a centralized exchange who wants to get, new users signing up to their platform and actually trading. Really, really, it's a really tough question to really answer, because like I said, I think it just changes so often. You asked me that question in 6 months, I'm very sure it'll be a different answer. 12 months ago, there were some really, really strong launch pads. CoinList was still kind of okay at the time. Legion was really taking off. But yeah, that question is going to really change, right, in terms of which would be the best launch pad.
Yeah, 100%. I think like in this cycle, at least since 2024, 2023, we've had phases where certain launch pads were successful, and then we had the next one and the next one and the next one, each kind of featuring a different set of projects. So that's great. That's really interesting. And another thing that's a very hot topic right now, and still maybe it's because of the pain people had to endure on 10th of October. That was also my birthday, so it's kind of crazy that it happened. the crypto massacre happened on that day. But yeah, how was momentum on that day? Was it like the biggest stress test for you all? As someone still kind of growing their product suite, and what kind of things were you kind of learning experiences from that day? You said that TVL kind of crashed and it's already back up now. But beyond that, what are some of the things you can kind of pick up from as are you building a DEX? You're going to build your own trading experience and stuff like that. Yeah, what was that day like?
And KG, Vinny's been doing a lot of AMAs on these, so I'm super excited to sort of get the filtered, sort of collated answer on this.
Yeah, we had that was pretty insane. We did 5 AMAs in 6 days, with a lot of different. We did with KOLs, we did it with SUI projects and non-SUI projects, and I can dive into that in a little bit. I mean, like, it was an interesting thing when it happened, especially. Look, we are a spot DEX, so we were quite immune in the respect that, like, we didn't have to deal with any liquidations. We didn't have to really deal with anything. We were talking to our PER partners. Borrowing and lending was like completely crushed. It was fairly normal in terms of just another day. I mean, a lot of people, because we're a CLNM, which is like a Uniswap V3, a lot of positions moved out of range. But for most people, that's not a big deal. You're in USDT, USDC, you're still in stable coins, you're in XSUI, which is our LST. SUI, you're still in XSUI, right? So the biggest impact was the TVL. I mean, we crashed from 570 down to 420. And like we said, I think we're back up to like 480, 490 today. So it's been recovering. What are we at? Yeah, 482. So not too bad. But there has been a big ripple effect, and I think that's what the conversation has been with everybody. Like, what's the impact? Like, are you going to delay Buidlpad? Are you going to delay TGE? Everybody's asking it. We're like, no, everything is business as usual. The protocol was perfectly fine. Nothing went down, not even for a single second. As a DEX, or even if you're a centralized exchange, we had our highest day of fees on record in those 24 hours. It was like over 380,000, which is really incredible, because all that money, went back to the liquidity providers. So they all benefited from that. And so we actually had a lot of ongoing interest coming in after the liquidation event, because people were just looking for like safe, yield on chain. And V3 is always been like a very safe place, CLMM DEX. Just to remind people as well, we're actually VE33 DEX, like Aerodrome. So after we TGE, within a couple of months, we'll be pivoting and launching the VE33 model. And that creates like a whole flywheel effect, where the token holders can lock their MMT into VMT and earn the trading fees and incentives, right? Instead of that going back to the LPs, it goes to the voters, which is a really cool function that Aerodrome really made, very, very popular. I guess, yeah, the AMAs was super interesting, because we did it in a couple of different formats, but the one that really took off for us was we got the top traders globally, with the including Miles Deutscher, with the top 2 KOLs in all of Korea, which is We Crypto Together and Fire Ant, and some of the top KOLs from China. And we did like kind of like a 3-way thing, like telling us like what was it like in each region. Global was super interesting. I was actually at Miles' place, and we had someone from one of the head traders from Selene over too. So that was like a very, very technical conversation, nonstop for 4 hours. Let's find out who's been liquidated, what's going to be happening. Miles kind of put the thing out before the liquidation event, that he put the chance for us going into a bear soon was 15%. Now it's like 30, 35%. So there's been a lot more bearish sentiment, but it was super interesting hearing, say, for example, Koreans, because Koreans were really not that impacted. Just because Koreans, it's illegal to trade perpetuals, so most of them are just in spot, and most of them are just trading the kimchi premium, which has been a big recurring theme in our conversations. And so in Asia, which I always see as like a forward indicator of the market, especially China, because I feel like the Chinese traders and investors are always either too early or too late. Usually these days becoming too early, because they're very aggressive, right, in entering and exiting the market. And it's super interesting, because most of those creators, they spoke to all of their big whales, and most of the big whales had gotten out of leverage positions, long positions anyway, a couple weeks before the crash, right? Because the writing was on the wall that, you know, we're potentially heading into this bear, that they just didn't really see much sentiment. If you look at RSI and MACD and all those indicators, it didn't look that good. And so China, the big players, a lot of them weren't really impacted. But what was super interesting was the recurring theme that what caused the crash and how it impacted on us. I mean, largely it was because a lot of people were trading perpetual. You know, usually you would have a spot position, but why don't you just do 1.2, 1.5, 2x leverage on, say, lighter or hyperliquid? And those guys all got completely wiped out because normally 2x is meant to be even safe for something like SUI, right? SUI crashed from $3.40 to 56 cents. There was this one creator Bong that got liquidated 15 million in his phantom. You know, we don't know what his liquidation price or leverage is, but it wasn't that high. But that was really unfortunate to see. And I think the most important thing was kind of the fallout and the impact. I had a lot of people messaging me, you know, are you okay? That was something all the creators are saying. We're like, geez, like why are we not okay? But I totally get it, because there are other people who got liquidated hard and they lost, you know, 80, 90, nearly 100% of their net worth, especially in these safe bets, right? 1.2, 1.5x. You know, there were people who got into SUI over a year ago who had leveraged positions from like $1.50 and lower. Even 2x, they should have been safe, but it's pretty crazy that they got affected. But overall, it was really positive to see how much the community had rallied around us and really stayed supportive of us. And, you know, a lot of them were actually like, can you push back things, you know, with Buidlpad? And we're like, no, like things are still going really well for us. And it's actually kind of better in a way that with the market going down, if you can capture a lot of the mindshare, it's much cheaper to do that now when there's lots of noise and it's a bull run and you're competing against like 20 other projects. You know, we're constantly being compared to Monad. You know, most of the days we're flipping between number 1, number 2 on Kaito, for example. And Kaito is a whole separate thing. You know, some people see it as an echo chamber, especially because a lot of projects that have listed this year, most of them hack Kaito. And you can do that by doing like a pay for play model. By like most of the top creators, if you just search by top creators in Kaito, I don't know how many people know this, but the truth is most of them actually are pay for play models. So you literally pay them and they boost your ranking. We don't do that. We don't do any paid KOLs, or the KOLs come through an allocation system. And we didn't even do any additional incentives either, because most of the projects going into TGE, they would incentivize their Kaito community and their creators by doing like, say, oh, here's an extra number of airdrop only for the top 20 or the top 50. So we actually didn't do anything like that. It's just been purely organic, driven by Buidlpad and also driven by the NFT, you know, the data NFT drop that we just announced on Wednesday. And that's a big reason why
I was going to ask about that. What's up with it? I've been just seeing so many different screenshots up. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was a huge success. It allowed us to climb back up to number 1 on Kaito without having to pay anything, you know, which is really, really interesting. I mean, in terms of the NFT campaign, it's funny because it was inspired by Monad's cards. And we partnered with like SUI Foundation, over 40 different protocols. Half of them are actually non-SUI protocols, because we really wanted to capture the crypto Twitter mindshare as much as we could. You know, and again, looking at both Kaito and non-Kaito, we want to have that big spread. And it just allows anybody who's been pre-selected, either through our partners or through being a community contributor, such as like being top 1,000 on the WAGMI leaderboard, or if you're in the top 20,000, we did a lucky draw for 2,500 of those people. And they, you know, you can check if you'll connect your X and your SUI address. If you qualify, then you can nominate 3 people. And once we close that on the 22nd, we're going to announce an extra 5,000. So it's 15,000 sold out NFTs that will go out to everybody. You get a whole bunch of ecosystem benefits. But what's really cool is the token generation lab with the blue chip launchpad I mentioned earlier. Every single project that goes onto that, when you hold that title deed NFT, you will also get an airdrop of all of the tokens that go there in perpetuity, right? So the value is like, what is the future value of all of the blue chip SUI protocols that we'll be launching through Momentum?
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like the NFT stuff was really hyped up in the wormhole communities as well. Everyone ended up asking me for, you know, one of my 3 referrals as well. which was super interesting. Vinny, I want to go back to the V3 VE33 decks. Is there anything else in the Momentum sort of roadmap after that? How is the team thinking about new products? I saw that there was some chatter about RWA stuff as well, like gold being tradable. How's the team thinking about roadmap? What are next steps?
Yeah, so we announced Momentum X at Sui IRL, which is like the biggest creative event that Sui had hosted in history. They flew like 80 of the top creators from around the world to Bali, and that was a really incredible week, hanging out with them and the Sui team as well. Yeah, that's we announced Momentum X, and what that is it's like an on-chain Robinhood, right? In short, so in the future you'll be able to trade like tokenized assets like RWAs, stocks, ETFs, gold, like you mentioned, through our platform, because our vision has always been a trade everything in one place, and that's really the long-term goal. We announced Momentum X, which includes some really interesting tech stack from Sui. It's utilizing Walrus on the storage level and Nautilus and Seal, which is like a universal KYC layer that's like been built into Sui, but it hasn't really been used much by projects. But Sui's just built all of this like incredible tech under the table and like pushed it out. But the adoption is like really just coming now, right? These next couple of years from everything that they built. And so that's what Momentum X is. We also have the Perpetual that we announced. So both those products are going to roll out in the next 6 months within TGE, probably a lot sooner. So we're really excited to share more about what we're doing there into the future.
Awesome. I think we are almost at time. We usually ask this to everyone who comes on the pod, and I think this is because Sui is kind of still growing as an ecosystem, and there's so many interesting things happening. For future builders thinking about choosing Sui as their home, what is your number one advice for them?
So I think it depends on a couple of factors. I think the most common question people really ask is, what is the hottest chain to launch on right now, right? And that answer will change probably in 6 months. But right now, if you look at the world of crypto, in EVM land, Base has basically sucked everything, right? You've got Base, you have a little bit of Ethereum still ongoing, and then BNB. But after that, it just drops off, right? Then you've kind of got Arbitrum, Avalanche a little bit, and then after that, no one's even close. Then you have Solana, right? And then after that, you've got Sui. And what's interesting about Sui is they're very, very strong on the DeFi side, but they're not strong on the other side, and they've been building that up, with Game 5 with Sui Play. They've had a lot of excellent games move over. And I think it depends on your vertical, but definitely if you're in the vertical and you have a lot of users, the Sui Foundation is really open to speaking and bringing over these right type of projects. They just have these strong foundations, strong communities. I would reach out. You can reach out to us, and we'd be happy to refer you over to Sui Foundations. See if you guys are a good fit. They're one of the only foundations that are that are still really, I guess, really cashed up in the sense that they're very different to other layer ones. They don't do airdrops. They don't like just give away money freely. They instead incentivize all of their protocols, traditionally based on like on-chain activity, which has been the way to go, and that's allowed them to grow such a strong following whilst keeping most of their treasury, right, and not just playing this airdrop game like most of the EVMs have like overly done. Berry Chain is probably the best example of that. They were hot a year ago, but the moment they dropped their incentives, chain just basically crashed overnight, right? Their TVL just dried up. Like one of our partners, for example, Concrete, over like 1 billion TVL, that just went to next to nothing really fast because it was all farming Berry Chain, right? So yeah, I think the best advice is it depends on what your vertical is, but really focus on a vertical. Like make sure your product has a lot of users, and being able to prove those metrics and reach out to us, because we'd be very, very happy to talk to like have you launch through Momentum and give you the right introductions to Sui Foundation if you're not talking to them already.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I think you mentioned it's going to be similar to Aerodrome on Base, where you guys will also list new projects, and that's going to be done by voters, and that's going to be super interesting. This is amazing, Vinny. You never get to, it's always some of these newer chains, they're popping up, but you really don't get to understand them that much. But this was an awesome episode, and looking forward to the TGE. And maybe once that's over, we'll have you on again.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks so much for having me on, guys.
All right. Thanks so much, Vinny. Thanks for coming on.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.